Hey, Frost Mage's Valorant here, and by this point, I know you've probably already seen the last-minute nerfs we got this week, and then Blizzard changed their mind on one of the nerfs, so we lost even more Frozen Orb and Blizzard damage, and then we got a patch release date. It's just over a week from now, and when all this dropped, I was right in the middle of a whole video on Mythic builds, and the nerf pretty much wiped out everything I'd been working on, so I just wanted to recap the nerfs, rerun all of my sims, and give you my latest assessment of Frost Mage as we head into 9.2 on February 22nd. So the initial nerf that came down was 8% less damage on Frozen Orb, 5% less damage on Blizzard, and the Frozen Orb cooldown reduction provided by Blizzard ticks was cut in half. But perhaps the worst change was a new internal cooldown on Icy Propulsion. And I had a whole rant about this all ready to go, but Doravon from BDGG, who's a major contributor to the Mage community, posted this feedback in the PTR forums, and honestly, I can't say it any better than he did. Within only a few hours, Blizzard responded saying that they would retract the Icy Propulsion nerf, and instead they would further nerf Frozen Orb and Blizzard. Obviously, at this time of publishing, they've already retracted this nerf, but if you'd like to read Doravon's feedback post, you can find a link to that down in the description below. So ultimately, what we're left with is this. Frozen Orb and Blizzard were both reduced by 12%, and they did decide to keep the cooldown reduction nerf on Blizzard, which unfortunately is a nerf that's aimed primarily at Mythic Plus, but is actually quite a major blow to one of the few things that made us unique in Raid. It's a huge hit to our sustained cleave and our funnel damage. I had quite the unenjoyable experience of briefly testing the nerfed Icy Propulsion on PTR before they retracted it, and you know, I don't care about numbers and DPS, but I do care about feeling more powerful over the course of an expansion. And after over a year of dealing with Icy Veins' uptime mechanic, slowly getting better and better, it felt like they sent us back to the beginning of Castle Nathria with just that one change. But what's done is done. They did give it back, and all things considered, I still feel Frost's single target and potentially raid performance is still pretty strong going into 9.2. So let's rerun all the sims and see how things look. If you'd like any more detail regarding any of these sims, they're all posted in my Discord, and you can always hop in there anytime and ask. Quick disclaimer here, while I may have a contributor role on the official Mage Discord, Alter Time, the opinions in this video are my own. And do not reflect any official stance of the Mage community at large. Second, the Mythic Plus theory crafting video I was working on was a collaboration with two other Frost Mage content creators, and unfortunately I didn't get a chance to publish that video, but I believe in supporting the work of other creators, so I'd like to plug Ultimate Zero and Manather, two other excellent Frost Mage content creators who've put a lot of work into their own channels, and you can find a link to both of their channels in the description below. So first up, looking at raid builds, and all these sims are run with Icy Veins Conduit, Icelands Conduit, Covenant specific Conduit, and then all of them include 4-piece tier set and double legendaries. So starting with single target, and once again we're still running Combat Storm talent on pure single target, and we're holding it until we apply Winter's Chill to the target. So looking first at Slick Ice, no major surprises here. Of course, we expect to see Necrolord on top because Slick Ice, Deathborn, and the Necrolord's second legendary all have excellent synergy. However, Theatar is really not far behind at all. Next up, single target with Freezing Winds. Theatar is actually on top here. I will admit I'm a little surprised to see Nadia so high up here, and I promise I double-checked the gear profile that I ran these with. It is at 33.3% crit, so this one's a little surprising, but hey, it is what it is. So ultimately, there's not really any changes here since the first couple of videos I posted with double legendary sims and playtesting and whatnot. Necrolord and Venthyr are still pretty much neck and neck, but as we get into the next few screens, you'll see why I personally am leaning toward Necrolord overall. So with all these Frozen Orb and Blizzard nerfs, I wanted to try and see if the breakpoint changed. Like, before, we would cast Blizzard on cooldown on 2 or more targets, no matter what. And so at first, running these numbers with a Venthyr build, I was pleased to see that that still doesn't really change. Even after the nerfs, it's still a gain to use Freezing Winds and cast Blizzard on 2 or more targets. Unfortunately, it's not nearly as much of a gain as it used to be, which perhaps is why these next numbers make sense. Take a look at Necrolord 2-target sims with both Freezing Winds and Slick Ice, and with casting Blizzard on 2 targets versus actually not casting Blizzard. And the first thing you might notice is that these numbers are much higher than any Venthyr build, but also, not only is Slick Ice significantly better than Freezing Winds on 2 targets if you're playing Necrolord. Remember, there's that synergy I was talking about. But also, it's a significant gain to just not cast Blizzard at this target count. So naturally, I had to take that a step further and fully explore all of this. At first I was curious, well, what about ignoring Blizzard just during Deathborn, but still casting it outside of Deathborn? So here you can see I simmed that option, and surprisingly, it was actually better to never Blizzard on 2 targets as Necrolord. I will admit I did not expect this result, but there it is. So next we had to test 3 and 4 targets, and I apologize in advance, but this is where it gets a little complicated. So at 3 targets, we're still using Slick Ice, which makes sense with how Deathborn works, right? But now at 3 targets, we are casting Blizzard, but only outside of Deathborn. And it's not until here, at 4 targets, that we start casting Blizzard on cooldown. And of course, Freezing Winds Legendary also takes over again. But even here, Slick Ice and only Blizzarding outside of Deathborn is really close behind, honestly. So what's the takeaway from all this? Basically, if you're playing Venthyr or Kyrian or Night Fae, nothing really changes here. Except you use Comet Storm on pure single target now, but that's something I've discussed quite a bit on this channel already. You're still using Freezing Winds on 2 or more targets. You're still casting Blizzard on 2 or more targets. But that Blizzard and Frozen Orb nerf hit us pretty hard. So hard, in fact, that if you're playing Necrolord, the synergy between Slick Ice, Deathborn, and Death's Fathom is enough to outweigh those things, up to 3 targets anyway. So as long as you can work around the movement requirements on some of these raid fights, Necrolord with Slick Ice has pretty huge value throughout the raid. And based on these numbers I'm seeing here, if Blizzard will only hit 3 targets, you don't start using it until Deathborn has ended. But if it'll hit 4 targets, you cast it on cooldown. Next up are a lot of different Mythic Plus build variants that I had been testing before the nerfs rolled out, and I made lots of little APL tweaks to almost all of these builds. For instance, Shifting Power with the Night Fae builds is only cast when Blizzard, Frozen Orb, Icy Veins, and Rune of Power are on cooldown. The Bone Chilling builds have some code in there to use Pet Freeze on your 2-piece procs, and the Necrolord ramp builds like Cold Front and Slick Ice have various tweaks here and there that, honestly, I was going to go in great depth on all of this in my full Mythic Plus video, but now that we have a patch date, I need to buckle down and focus on a 9.2 guide. That Mythic Plus video is probably not going to come out in the sense that it originally was. But if any of these builds remain viable in Mythic Plus, I will go in depth on them in my 9.2 guide. So I really only simmed Necrolord and Night Fae build variants here. There's nothing wrong with playing Kyrian or Venthyr in Mythic Plus, but if you do, nothing really changes from how you'd play in 9.15. You still use Freezing Winds, and then either Splitting Ice, which is very pug friendly, or Freezing Rain, which is a little better suited towards coordinated groups. Unfortunately, none of the new second legendaries really offer anything that would change your playstyle. Necrolord and Night Fae, on the other hand, their second legendaries change things up a bit. Now, the one thing I want to say, none of these builds are bad. I promise you, you can get Keystone Master with any of these builds. Even the lowest one shown here is still more than capable of getting KSM. In fact, some of these Necrolord ramp builds you see near the top here, they may sim well, but they're not going to be very good in 15s and below, because things die too quickly, and they're almost certainly not going to be very pug friendly. These builds look very good on paper, but these are really only going to shine with a highly coordinated group. These are probably not even for the majority of players. So just to summarize here, these are 5 target sims, and the naming convention I used here is Covenant, then Legendary, then Talents, either Bone Chilling or Lonely Winter, and either Splitting Ice or Freezing Rain, and then last are the Conduits. All the various Necrolord Cold Front builds here are absolutely capable of the highest damage output. And guys, I will be the first one to say it. You know, a couple videos ago, I commented about how this Cold Front build was a meme and it would never be viable. And I have to admit, I was probably wrong on that one. However, the vast majority of this build's damage output comes during that 45 to 50 second Deathborn window. So, the more your group pulls around your cooldowns, the better. So, in that regard, it plays quite similar to a Boomkin, really. Next up, we have most of the Necrolord Slick Ice ramp builds, which honestly is my personal favorite in terms of actual gameplay. And I'm only showing 5 targets here, but the nice thing about these builds is they retain excellent single target damage. So they're still quite strong on tyrannical weeks. And then down here in the middle, we have a scattering of Freezing Winds and Disciplinary Command builds, and the further we go down the list here, the smoother the damage profile gets. And basically, the more pug-friendly the build gets. The one thing I want to note here, you'll see the best simming Night Fae build here is using Disciplinary Command Legendary, which hasn't really seen much play yet this expansion outside of Fire Mage builds. But if you aren't a fan of Disciplinary Command, like I said, Freezing Winds is still a really solid build option. It worked through all of 9.15. It will work in 9.2. It is still more than capable of getting KSM, and it's really only at the highest key levels where you're going to see players making build decisions where any of this really matters much. Obviously, the numbers on these builds are a lot lower than what I simmed last week, thanks to all the nerfs, but the takeaway here is that there are tons of viable Frost Mythic Plus builds in 9.2. Perhaps more decision points for you as a player than I think we've ever had since this game came out. Great for you as a player, not so great for me as a content creator. So there you have it, folks. I hope this answers some of your questions with regards to how much the nerfs will affect us in both Raid and Mythic Plus going into 9.2, which launches in just over a week on February 22nd. If you still have any questions after watching this, or maybe if you can come up with any rotation tweaks you'd like me to sim, by all means, drop a comment below or on my Discord. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please consider dropping a like and or subscribing to my channel. They do help grow my channel and help me reach a greater audience. Last but not least, I recently decided to move away from Twitch live streaming and put my full effort into this YouTube channel. If you were a fan of the live stream, I apologize, but I had a lot of personal reasons for this decision. You can still chat with me anytime on my Discord, and next up will be my official 9.2 Frost Mage guide. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.